it's been started.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for joining. My name is Craig Bartell, and I am a solutions engineer with Tableau, part of the Salesforce family of products. And I'm based in Tampa, Florida, but I have worked with North Carolina, various agencies, DIT, mainly from a deployment standpoint, but also many of the other agencies as they've been rolling out Tableau. My experience, by the way, is in business analytics. I have worked for a number of different business intelligence vendors over the past 20 plus years. And I'm also focused very specifically into state and local government. So I've worked with that for probably the better part of that 20 years. So I've seen quite a lot that goes on across the different agencies and states and all that fun stuff. So today we're going to focus in on Tableau Prep Builder, and our focus is really on the end user. And I'll get into that in just a minute. I have a few introductory slides that'll kind of set the stage, but for the bulk of the call, we will really get into a deep dive demonstration of how to use Tableau Prep Builder and why I think it could really help you out as an analyst slash end user. Just quick introductions. I'm really the main person that's going to be leading the call today, but there's also some other team members you should be aware of. Henry Wisniewski is the account exec, has worked a lot with the team in North Carolina. Jason Blanco is the customer success manager. I know he's not on today because he's in jury duty. Fun time there. But his role is really to focus on customer success. So, he will work with you in terms of enablement and best practices and things like that. Now, I do some of that too. I handle a lot of the demonstrations, webinars, and things like that. But just wanted to make sure you were aware of who all the team were. And now this kind of puts into focus what the different components are of an analytics process. And I really like this slide because it's if you go left to right, it's really all of the steps that we would do. And if you start thinking about who typically does those steps in your environment, you'll start to see where the value of the Tableau solutions really help out. So on the very left side here, we have all of our different sources of data. We have both relational, we have textual things on our desktop, we have applications, we've got all these different data sources out there. And then what we need to do is take them and extract, load, and transform them, commonly known as ETL. Now, what you'll find in many cases is the people that get saddled with doing this task tend to be your technical people that have a specialized skill set. They know how to use an ETL tool, or they can write scripts or Python, or they know SQL very well. And they end up creating these data sources, which end up becoming, the input to our visual analysis component of the process, right? Now, these arrows represent kind of the who does what, right? So you see this orange arrow right here is the kind of the typical representation of that. And then once we get that, we want to prepare the data, right? So let's say that somebody has prepared the data for you and you find out, oh, you know what? I've got nulls in my data. It's not aggregated at the right level. I need to fix some things before I can even move to this next step, which is visualizing and analyzing and gaining insights, which is really the most important part of this, right? And then we finally, once we are done visualizing and analyzing, we can share our findings and our insights and collaborate with our teammates, and then finally inform and act, right? Taking action on our insights, right? So it's kind of a full circle thing, but what you want to pay attention to is currently what we have is we have a lot of IT involvement here, a lot of these orange areas, and our goal is to kind of minimize that. And it's not that we don't like our IT people, it's just that we can have them better focused on things that are higher value add to their environment and let us do the things that really give us the value from an analytic perspective. So again, just kind of highlighting the different phases. Now, this next slide really kind of, again, left to right, overlays the process with our various components. And as you'll see, it's pretty simple. There's basically 3 components we have to deal with. So over here on the left, that's originally, you remember our data sources that we have. And then this is the area we're focusing in on today, Tableau Prep. It allows us to collect, clean, and connect our data sets together, right? And it's from an end user focus. We do everything at Tableau for the end user so that we can enable the end user to do these things and understand it without having it be incredibly complex and technical. Then, of course, we move to the next phase, which will be, I'll demonstrate this for you kind of briefly today, just to show you how it leads into this next step of visual analytics using Tableau Desktop. And then finally, what we would do is once we had our dashboards and insights and visualizations, or vizzes as we call them, we deploy them into Tableau Server. Actually, one of 2 environments, however. Tableau Server is the environment that you have installed currently at DIT, but there's an online hosted version of it called Tableau Online. It is the collaboration environment which is used to publish your content into. So that's really kind of the steps from left to right as to how we get there. And again, we're going to be focusing today on Tableau Prep. I'll get into a lot of this detail in just a few minutes, but really what Prep Builder is a tool that's very visual. You can see that we're going to actually create these data flows that you see on the right-hand screenshot there. And it allows us to drag and drop. And really what I love about Tableau Prep Builder is it for the first time, it allows me to visualize the structure of my data. Now, I'm a little different. I'm not talking about visualizing it in the sense of bar charts and all those different types of charts. It allows me to see things like, what is the distribution of data? Where do I have gaps in my data? Where do I have issues with my data, like in terms of cleanliness, right? It gets more to the governance side of my data. And it allows me to do quick on-the-fly type of things like remove duplicate values and remove punctuation that I don't want. And all the things that if you think of that you do like in Excel today or have to write a script for to do it all, we can do it very visually. And it supports, the wide range of data sources that we have supported in Tableau. And it does a lot of the preparation things that we typically would have had to have done before in that data source kind of acquisition step within Tableau Desktop. And then it's also extensible. You can incorporate Python scripts and R scripts if you've already, kind of done a lot of the work and have that knowledge imparted in those scripts, you can do that. Tableau Desktop, this is the visualization component. Again, very quickly, this is where rubber meets the road in terms of gaining our insights and finding our, creating our visualizations and that sort of thing. And then, of course, Tableau Server, Tableau Online, talked about that. This is the governed and secure environment where we publish our content. Okay, so just a last kind of quick intro. There's the way that we do our licensing, because this is important to understand who has access to the piece called Tableau Prep. A creator license, that typically being somebody who is going to be gaining insights and pulling together the different data sources they may need to use for this and future insights and dashboards and so on. The creator license comes with a desktop prep license. So just really kind of wanted to point that out. The other 2 roles are really more consumption roles. So an explorer or reviewer role is really that for somebody who is already on Tableau Server or Tableau Online and wants to create content up there or interact with the content up there. Okay, so just a kind of a quick, we get a lot of questions as to, well, who has access to it and so on. Again, from our perspective, we really do feel that everyone in the organization is someone that is capable of being able to do the analysis and create insights. They don't all have to be, consumers, but we fully realize there are people that just won't take on that role and so on. Okay, enough talking. Let's get into or enough slideware. Let's get into the demonstration here. That should say prep demo. I don't know why it says desktop demo. It's probably just an oversight on my part, but don't worry about that. Okay, so here is the kind of the home screen of Tableau Prep Builder. And Tableau Prep Builder has kind of if you've used Tableau Desktop before, you'll notice a common theme. We have our connections on the left-hand side where we're going to connect to our data, and I'll get into these in just a second. You see that we've got tiles representing our existing flows that we might have already created locally on our desktop here. I'm now on my desktop, by the way. I'm not on a server-based piece of this. I will mention there is now, if you're enabled for Tableau Server, there is also a version of this, an editor for Tableau Prep Builder up on server that if you have a creator license for, you can use it up there as well. So mention that. At the beginning too, I didn't kind of mention this, but this is kind of a series of webinars that covers different areas, right? Each one of the ones that we kind of walk through, right? The Prep Builder side, the Tableau Desktop side, and then the deployment side with kind of the end consumption. These are all separate webinars that we're doing in a series. So kind of think of this as the first one. I know many of you, possibly ones on the call today, might have attended the other webinars that I've done. That's okay. I'll kind of refer back to them. But if you're interested in kind of the how do we go from here to the next step of how do we do our visualizations, tune in for the next one, which will be in like 2 to 3 weeks. Okay, back to the flow here. So here's my existing flows that I've created. If I wanted to find one, I could just click on it and bring it back up. I won't do that right now. And then just from a learning standpoint, so there's lots of different options here. From a training standpoint, if you click these links, it will direct you to both online and video-based training that's all free that you can go to learn how to use Tableau Prep Builder. I think we have some phenomenal free resources that you can take advantage of. This one here, this visual dictionary, just kind of goes over what I'm going over here, but in a little more detail. Like when I get into a flow, it's going to define, you know, what this node means and why I would use it and that sort of stuff. And if you do want to move on to a more formal kind of a class, there's instructor-led classes that you can get to. And then there's just other resources that you have available. You can click on what's new in Tableau Prep because the version's been out for like 2 to 3 years now. We do improve it with lots of different, you know, new feature functionality. So just wanted to point that out. All right, so the example that if you've seen me do a prep demo in the past, I'm going to be doing it a little different today. I've been using an example for desktop, which kind of is centered around this concept of wanting to move to an area. And, you know, let's say that I am wanting to move to the Tampa Bay area and I'm wanting to find a house to live, but there's other considerations. I need to understand things like, you know, proximity to hospitals. I need to understand, you know, proximity to the high schools and schools that my kids need to go to. There's a lot of other ancillary data that I need to pull together. And I've done this kind of because it also highlights a lot of the kind of geospatial aspects of the product, but it also lends itself to a use case that could be very common in your environment. So I want you to be thinking about that. And that's the plan here. So let's say that, you know, you're new to the agency and you're trying to figure out, you know, for all your constituents, which in this case for this demo could be, you know, all the house listings that we have for the realtors, and you're trying to figure out the proximity to the closest, say, you know, DMV or medical treatment facility or, you know, whatever it may be. So there's lots of decisions and maybe survey information that comes into that. So we need to pull all of that together to do all of our analysis. Okay, so the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to connect the data. So you see on this left-hand list here, we've got all these different data source types, and they're really grouped into 2 different types. They're either local files, like what we call local, meaning they're on my desktop. Those would be like Excel, CSVs, PDFs, spatial files, meaning a shape file that I've pulled down from a GIS site. A statistical file, that could be the output of a model that I ran in SAS or R or SPSS, or it could be a Tableau extract. We'll skip that for now, or just a standard old CSV text file. So those are considered local file types. Then I've got my traditional server-based types. So I'll just kind of scroll down this list here. These would be your industry standard relational data types like SQL Server, see down here, or DB2, or you name it, Oracle. You know, see the long laundries. There's so many different data sources out there now, some cloud-based, some application-based. So this is where we're going to pull together information about these different data sources. So for example, the very first thing I'm going to do is pull in a text file. Now, I've got all of these different listing files here. I've got this, I went to a website called Redfin. That is a realtor site, and I wanted to find by zip code, all these zip codes here in my general area of town. This would be the east side of Tampa Bay, Florida. So I'm going to just open that CSV file. Now, what this is doing is it's immediately profiling that data set. So you see what's going on here. You see on this right-hand side, it's kind of, it hasn't yet refreshed, but what it's doing is it's looking at all of the data, all of the columns of data that came with my download. And it's giving me a little sample of what it looks like. So you see, it's also assigning a data type. It's showing me what the field name is. And if I scroll down the list here, again, you see all the different, this is really valuable data, right? Think of this as my constituent data. This is everything about my constituents that I need to know, right? And then I can now that I see kind of the profile view of things, one of the things that I want to point out here is that, think of this, many times, and I know this comes up a lot, is let's say that you have multiple counties or districts or whatever in your jurisdiction or state. You want to be able to pull together, and let's say that you just did a survey of all of the different laptop or computer facilities that you have available to constituents. So you basically are getting multiple files of data that you sent out, and you're getting it back in a standard format, but you've got like 20 or 30 or 100 even of these files, and they're all of the same format. So essentially we need to pull those all together. So what I can do is this little multiple file option here, which says I'm going to do a wildcard saying that anything starting with Redfin asterisk, all these CSV files here are data points for all the different zip codes by date that I want to bring in. So I've literally just done a union of all of these different data sources, CSV files that it's pulled together. This might be, and I can figure out, it's probably around 2,000 rows of data. But again, this is cool because let's say that in your data, you get a new data monthly data set and you need to just pull them together. You don't have to be doing a bunch of cut and pasting and all that traditional stuff you'd have to do in Excel and write scripts and do all that, right? This is what makes it so, easy to do. Now, what is happening here? So you see on this top, just to kind of cover off on this. So that's one of my settings. The other thing is data sampling. So many times, if you're pulling in millions of rows of data, the default, we're going to calculate a default sample size. That's because we're just doing queries in the background of your data. And if that data is huge, we need to limit the amount of sampling that we're doing. We do get a representative view, but what it's doing is a quick select, a sample based on some algorithm that gives us a good sample set. If we say, nope, we need to see all the data, I would just click that and I would get basically all of the data as my data sample. Okay, now up here is where we're defining our flow, as it's called. And one of the things we do is when we take a node, these are called nodes, and you see I've got a number of different things I could add here. I could add a cleaning step. I could add new rows. That's kind of the ability to fill where I have missing data. I could do an aggregation step. I could do a pivot. I could do a join, all these different things. So the first thing I've got is my listing. These are, again, all the listings for all the different zip codes that I want to pull together. All I want to do first is let's bring in this clean step. And if you use Prep for nothing more than to just view your data and analyze it to see what the heck is in it, this is a beautiful way to do it. So you see what I've got now. I've got column by column. It's doing a profile view of what's going on in my data. I can see distributions of data. I can see, for example, this single family residential. Well, this bar represents that I've got 1,191 bars. but I have very few multifamilies, very few mobile homes, right? Or maybe I don't even want to see mobile homes, right? I could get rid of those. So I love this because, for all those of you have going into Excel and putting filters on and trying to, quickly figure out what is the distribution of data, blah, blah, blah. You got so many different things at your disposal here to be able to just purely get a sense of what's in your data. Now, down below here is the row by row. This is like if you were in Excel, you were looking at a tabular view of your data, you would see all of the rows down below. Now, what's cool about this too is I can kind of pick and choose from field. Like, let's say I wanted to see, oh, where are these mobile homes, right? I could just click on that line item and it's actually now limiting the data down below. And I could say, oh, well, what are the mobile homes that are in Lithia? So I kind of sub-selected that. Now you see, this allows me to get a visual quick view as to what's going on in my data. Did I select the right data? Do I have the right data? Is it aggregated to the right level? And as its name would suggest, allow me to cleanse the data. So that's the first thing we're going to do here is let's start going through our data and using some of the features that will allow me to cleanse the data. Okay, so what things do we have available at our disposal? Well, one thing here is this thing called recommendations. So recommendations are some algorithms where we go through your data and say, you know what, this column is a candidate to, because maybe it finds multiple fields with separated values. You could split that field. Maybe if you don't have complete data, it will say, do you want to remove it? If it finds that, how in Tableau you have the ability to define a geography role, it's saying, hey, I found a field that seems to have city-based data. You might want to change that to a geo field. And then on down the line here, you see that this is a URL. Do you want to change the data role to URL? So these are helpful hints as to what would make sense to do in my data. I'm going to do this kind of field by field. I'm not going to do it through that feature. But the first thing I'm going to do is let's come over to this property type field. And you see that I've got these two multifamily. Well, I really don't care about the delineation of multifamily. I'd like to just kind of combine the two of those into one. And again, I want you to be thinking, what would you have to typically do today to do this in Excel? You'd have to be searching fields, cutting and pasting, blocking off, all that sort of stuff. All I have to do here is I could come in here and I could say, I want to, and now that you see all of these different types of functions I have available, I can do some filtering, I can do some cleaning, I can do some grouping, I can do some splitting of values. So in my case, I'm going to want to do some grouping of values, and I'm going to do it by manual selection. But you also see I can do it by pronunciation or common characters. Now this is really handy because if you've got people that have misspelled things in your data, this will literally go through it and it'll correct those pronunciations, right? So that you can have, I don't know, let's say somebody spelled the word rural wrong, WRRAL or something. It will correct that and combine and group the values into the proper pronunciation. So very, very helpful. I'm going to pick manual selection here. So what I then do is I say for this one, I want to combine into it what? I'm going to find the other multifamily. So now I've got these two together and I'm done, right? That's the way it works. You pick the one you want to combine into and then you add to it. Now, all I really care about, remember, is I say I had this little group pin that says, oh, you combined multiple fields together. I could just double click on this value and say, you know what? I don't want it to say 2 to 4 units. I just want it to say multifamily, period. That's it. So I just overwrote it. Now, it's not doing anything to your source data. Think of this as all kind of virtual in memory before we actually end up doing something like writing it out to a new data set. So there you go. And you will know that this has been grouped because you see this little paperclip icon here. Now, as I start doing multiple things, and I'll kind of show you this after I move through some examples, is it's tabulating a list of all of the things that I'm doing so that later on, if I want to rerun this flow, it's already there, right? Like if I come over here to this changes, you'll see that this is the first thing I did. I did a grouping of values where we did property type. 2 values were replaced with the value called multiple family. See? Okay. So I'll just shut that for now. Okay, let's come over to address. So in address, what I don't want to see is I don't want to see some punctuation, right? I want the numbers and the values of the street. So I'm going to come in here, I'm just going to say remove punctuation. That actually goes through all the values and starts removing any punctuation to that field. Okay, that's another thing. City. Well, city could potentially be a geographic field, so I would like to have it validated as such. That means that it will go through the list and determine if these are not valid city names, right? And you see this little light bulb here? This is saying, hey, here's a recommendation I suggest for you. Let me click it. It says, oh, change the data role to city. Yes, go ahead and apply that. So I'm going to let it go ahead now and validate that I don't have any bad values. Now I don't. I could have probably put one in here. But see, what I do notice is that I've got, obviously, some of my data sets has capitalized the values and some didn't. So I want to just quickly and easily consolidate these and make them all uppercase. So once again, I could just come into this clean option. I could say make uppercase. Now watch what happens when I select that. It's essentially condensing all of the values into like values, and I come up with the proper list of all the fields that I want, right? So again, hopefully this is making some, some impact on you as to the ease of being able to just see what's going on. And now you're visually seeing the impact of the changes that you make, right? So let me just continue on down here. The one thing about zip code is geographic. So I think I'm going to go ahead and have it change the data role to geographic. But in my case also, I want to make sure that the zip code is not numeric, right? Because it's technically it is a number, but we're not going to add it or subtract it or anything like that. So I'm going to come in here, click on it, and you see that I've got all these different data types and data roles. So first of all, for data roles, you see this list. This is what Tableau has built-in understanding of. We know what a valid airport code is, and we know what a valid city name is. We also know all of these things, congressional districts, countries, states and provinces, so that it will validate and it will show me where I don't have a valid value, right? So this is very, and if you've ever used Tableau before, you'll know that when you get into mapping this data, we can actually plot this on a map. So that's a very important kind of nice side effect of having the ability to put in a geography. So, and again, this data type, I'm going to just go ahead and manually change this to string because I don't want to see the comma there. Plus, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Okay. Let's go ahead and move a little bit onto the right here. Just another thing, let's say that you see where I have a lot of values kind of grouped here. If I want to see the individual actual values, I can select detail. And this is actually showing me each individual record's details all the way from low to high. So sometimes, you'd be looking at a very small subset of data in here. It makes a lot of sense to show a summary view of my data for distribution purposes. So again, you see I've got a lot of really good data here that's going to really help my analysis. In the location field, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clean this to have no punctuation. And then, I'll continue through here just to see if I've got any, interesting values here. Okay, this is good enough for now. So you see what we've done already. We've made 7 changes to our data. These will be persisted in our data flow. So when we rerun it in the future, we will be able to take advantage of these different things that I've already noticed and are able to fix on the way to go, right? Okay, so see if we missed anything at this point. By the way, if you do have questions, I will try if they're quickly answerable. If not, I may try to take them at the end. So I'm gonna keep rolling here. Okay, so remember I said at the beginning that what we wanted to do was combine this with maybe some other data, right? We've got survey data. So I wanted, as I was moving to this area, I wanted to find out some information about what do the constituents think about safety in this community or this zip code, or what do they think about recreational activities? Do they have enough of them? Or infrastructure, are the roads in good condition, and all that kind of. So we did a survey, or we got access to a survey, and that survey is in a different format, right? It's in a downloaded. Let's say I pulled it down from an Excel from a website, right? So I'm going to bring in a new data set here. I'm going to click on Excel, and here's my survey data by zip code. Now we have another data set. Bringing it in. Now it moved down and it created a new node in my network here. So we're going to need to kind of analyze what we have going on in this data set, right? There's my profile view. And let me just throw a clean step on there to just get some insights into what I've got in that data set. Again, and this is what I love about, now quickly, oh yeah, there's first names, last names, there's my emails, there's my gender, and I can see the distributions of these. These are, by the way, survey responses to different questions. So this is about recreation, 1 to 10. 1 to 10 being recreation's awesome in this area. 1 is we really don't have a lot of recreation. So we do it across recreation, healthcare, education, infrastructure, safety, and there's our good old zip code field. Now, since it's a survey, I really don't care about the fact that, Fred Jones replied to this. All I care about are some different things like demographic information or just the questions themselves. So I'm going to need to do a little bit of aggregation here. And I may want to just independently analyze my survey data. But for the most part, what I want to do is, excuse me, first of all, I want to pivot this data because I don't want to see all of these questions in their individual column. What I really want to see is a question column. In other words, I want to see a column with recreation, healthcare, education, and then an individual value field that shows me the actual the survey result for that one. And then I'm going to eventually aggregate them up to a level of zip code. Remember, because I said I really don't care about the individual one. All right, so you saw an option here to pivot. So let's see here. Let's do a pivot. And in that pivot, again, this is what's so nice about, you don't have to be a programmer. You really never saw me enter any code to do any of this fun stuff. I'm going to pivot the following columns. Oh, and by the way, you see this option here, columns to rows? There's also an option if you want to unpivot, where you say rows to columns. I guess you could say that's pivoting in reverse or whatever, but we're going to leave it set to columns to rows because that's really what we want to do. Now, if you're unsure as to what the heck I'm going to end up with, no worries, because we'll be able to use a clean step to see the result, right? So that's, again, another side benefit here. So I'm going to drag these in, and that's all I have to do to pivot. Now, what did it actually do? It created these 2 new columns and got rid of these 5 columns, and it created a new column called Pivot 1 Names. I'm going to rename that and called it Survey Question, right? And then this Q is actually the survey, I'll just call it survey answer, okay? So there's my survey answer. And now let's throw a clean step on it and see what we get. Okay, now down below here, I can see what I'm basically getting are survey answers, at the level of question for the person, their gender and their zip code, right? So that's kind of what I asked for, right? I want to have a row for every question and every answer by person, by gender, by zip code. So that's what I asked for. And if I'm confused about things, and I need to go back and kind of let's look and see for all the questions that had to do with recreation, that had to do with females, that had to do with the zip code, this zip code here, boom, I can see, and I can look visually down here to see if that's the right data that I expected, right? Okay, so the next thing I would like to do is I would like to aggregate this at the level of zip code. So we're going to add an aggregation step. Hopefully you can see what's going on here. Kind of what we're working toward is eventually we're going to aggregate and join together these data sets at the level of zip code so that I can see when I'm looking at a particular zip code what the average response is for recreation or the average response is for education, right? And just similarly to what we did before, what I'd like to do is I'd like to aggregate this time now on zip code. And I'd like to aggregate at the level of gender. And I would like to aggregate at the level of survey question. And also we need to have then the survey answer. And that answer is going to be our aggregated field. And I don't want it as a sum, I want it as an average. Okay, so hopefully, now this could get a little confusing, but the beauty of it is that you just literally say, what do I want to group by? I want to group by the question, the gender, and the zip code, right? I'm getting a question for every line. For the zip code for males, I'm getting an average survey answer. For education for this zip code for females, I'm getting an average answer for this, right? So, and again, I could throw a clean step on top of this and see what my results look like, right? This is just kind of another quick way of doing that, right? So now what I want to do is I'm going to eventually want to join on zip code. Well, remember my zip code was originally numeric and I changed it to a string type field. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm just going to say, let's change this to a string. And now what I want to do is merge these two together or join these two together so that I can get a consensus by zip code with my listings on what data I have and what the survey results are. So the only thing I'm going to do too here is you see where this is clean step 1. I can rename this. I could say this is my listings or cleaned listings. And on this one, I could say this is my survey results. Now this is helpful because as you start getting more complex flows, you may want to add a little call out at this point and say something like, we want to add a description, this survey was done on 5/2/22. And you can document what's going on along the way as you go ahead here. So let's say that 2 years from now, somebody comes to review this this flow and they have no idea what you've done. You can self-document what is all going on in here. Now, I said we wanted to join these two together. Let's do that. Let's take our listings. I'm going to drag it over, and you see when I hover on top of this node, I get two options. I can either join it or I can union it. Well, in my case, I'm going to join it. See what happened there? Now it connects the two together, but I get an error saying basically, you must have a join clause, right? Well, it couldn't optimally find my join clause. So let's come over here and let's add one to make sure that we have the right join. Well, on our survey results, we have zip code. And in our listings, we have somewhere in here, we have zip or postal code. They weren't the same name. That's why it didn't pick it up. Okay, now I probably have more survey data than I do for the existing zip codes that I'm looking for listings in. So what it's done, you see here on this little Venn diagram, it's saying the inner result is showing me the ones that match. So I have zips that match up. Down here, I can see, oh, you know what? 1,600 or 16,000 of my rows matched, and that's part of the join result. But of the survey results, there are 140 rows that it matched, and 955 that it did not match, right? So now I get a better sense of, oh, maybe, I don't know, however I want to do it. I go back and get more zip code data, or no, I'm only focused on these zip codes, so I really don't care about that. This is really what makes a lot of sense. The important thing is you can see what it's doing as part of this join. You can very quickly see the data. Like, for example, what if I wanted to see just what is that set of surveys that don't match my listings? I could click over here and uncheck the middle. Now I'm getting the left side of my join showing the surveys that don't match up with my listings. And I can see all the survey results down here. I could, look at all the results in here. So again, this is, if you don't understand left and outer, right and outer joins and all that, this is the beauty of this tool. It helps you understand what you're getting as part of that actual data transformation that you're doing. Okay, well, I feel pretty good about the result. Again, I could come in here, I could add a clean step. And then if we look at that clean step, we can see what we're getting as a result. So if we kind of just look at the values down below here, and I'll kind of scale this up a little bit so you can see at the bottom, there's a survey answer per row here by the zip code. And so each one of these rows is a listing. And then essentially we're able to then plot that on a map. So now what I'm going to do is let's actually visualize what this might look like, because I want to see the average values. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on one of these nodes here. You see this says preview in Tableau desktop. So this is beautiful. What I can do now is before I even have published this data set out to a file format, I can see, am I on the right track? So let's do that. Let's go ahead and say, let's preview in Tableau desktop. It's actually, what it's doing in the background here is it's opening up a new Tableau desktop session. Go to my Tableau desktop. You see it pop open here. Boom, there it is. So now I can figure out, I didn't have to go through that data source step because it's already done. It's essentially created an extract of the data for me on the fly. So let's say, for example, let's see what the average price is by zip code. Let's just do that first. So I'm going to come in here. And again, if you want to see the inner workings of Tableau Desktop in a demo, we'll do that in our next one. That'll kind of take from here at this point where I'm leaving off and allow us to dive into the actual kind of visualization side of this. So if I simply just drag zip code into my drop field here, I will see all the zip codes on my map. And if I want to just change the map view real quickly to show streets, boom, I can see my streets right there. Now, this is just essentially showing me where the center point of a zip code is. But let's say that I wanted to show the average survey answer for a particular value. So let's see. I'm going to first drag out survey answer to color. I'm going to say, show me that average survey. Now what you're looking at here, this is the average survey answer for all questions. So that's not really what I'm after. So I really would want to focus or filter based on the actual question. So we're going to go ahead here and let's say survey answer. Let's just drag up here. Oops, sorry. Survey question, filter. And for right now, let's just put in, recreation. Let's say that's the one I want to see. Okay, now if I hover over, you see how I'm hovering over every zip code. The darker one are the higher survey answers for recreation. So this again is giving me, does this kind of feel right for my data, for my analysis? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe I need to go back to the Tableau Prep and figure something else out. But you see, I'm now getting a sense for what the values are. Now at this point, I'm going to kind of just maybe take it one step further, but again, just highlight the fact that we're going to get into Tableau Desktop in a lot more detail in one of the follow-on webinars. But let me for informational sake, let's just go ahead and excuse me. I'm going to add another sheet here, which will allow me to do a little bit more fine-grained analysis of those different survey questions. I'm just going to come in here, find my survey answer. I'm going to drag that to rows. I'd like that to again be the average survey value. There it is. I'm going to put that average survey value. And let's just say I was, wanting to do some research here by zip code. I would drag that in and say, at the level of zip code, there's my values for each one. But I'm going to show you something pretty cool here. So I'm going to remove zip code, leave this as is, and now let's overlay this particular sheet, which I'll just call survey, on top of our map. Now, if I go ahead back to my sheet, and in my tooltip, just drop in that sheet called survey. Let's make the width a little wider. Let's make it 500 pixels. Now for every hover over, you see for that zip code, I can see the values for each one of those. So if I look at this one, I see it's got recreation at 6.5. If I look at this one, it's 6.9, right? I can get a very specific view of each zip code. Maybe I'm really focused on this particular zip code because I've found some houses that meet that requirement. Safety is very important to me, and I see that I've got a decent value for this. And I could even take it further. I could put on this map, or I could put on this chart the average value for all zip codes that I'm looking at, and how does this compare to the average? That's analytics, right? That's kind of the cool thing that I'll do in the next side of the house. But again, put it in your world, right? If you are doing demographic analysis across your different districts or zips or locations, and you want to see specifically where your constituents are, this is a kind of a quick dovetail with that sort of a scenario of how you could use Tableau Prep to prepare your data and get it to the point of visualization, right? We started with nothing. We got 2 data sets, and now we actually are gaining insights into what's going on in this particular area. Okay. Let me just wrap things up, and then I'll jump to the questions. So I'm going to head back over to Tableau Prep. So what we haven't done yet is write this data set out. So the last thing I'm going to do here is put an output step on here. And that output step gives me some options. So what do I want to save it to? Either a file, a published data source. That means I want to publish this data source out to Tableau server so that somebody else can use it to build their visualizations, right? Or I want to write it back to a database table. Traditionally, Tableau Prep Builder was not designed to be used as kind of a self, ETL tool. However, we kind of found that people were, had needs to be able to create, say, a reference table out of what they were doing because it just, would help them out, right? So we added that capability, I don't know, maybe about a year ago. But just understand that now you can save it to one of these 3 different types, and then you just give the details. So file, or where is that file located? You can give it a location, and so on. And you can also do write options. You could say append it, just create a whole new table, and so on. And then if I click run the flow, it will actually run it and put it in that data source, how I've named it, and away we go. One thing that we're really not going to talk much about today that I just want to mention is that you can actually go to the next step, which is scheduling this to run on an ongoing basis by simply coming up here to say publish flow. And if I go ahead and publish this flow into Tableau server and then schedule it, that will enable this to run, on a schedule on a timed basis. Now, that's kind of a separate, that's called Prep Conductor. That is a component that you guys have at DIT, and is a real good way to put this kind of into production so that it pulls, at regular intervals, values correctly into your data set, or into this output data set for analysis, and then maybe refreshes the dashboard as part of that output. So that's how that works. Okay, that is kind of how things work with Tableau Prep. So I am going to kind of go up to the list here. Let me start. First of all, let me get my chat list going. Do you have a recommendation of how many actions to perform in each clean step? What I've done is perform one type of action per clean step, one clean step to correct the field, then new clean step. That's kind of a personal decision, honestly. What you can get is very complex, where to the point where things are dependent on each other. So you have to be careful about that. Just again, there's no hard and fast rule. I'd say whatever makes the most logical sense for you. As you can see, the more nodes you add to your flow here, the more complex things get. Sometimes when I'm working in Tableau Prep, I want to divide a data set based on some field. For example, a test score may have state level scores and region level scores as different rows. I want to divide that into states and regions is the most efficient way to bring in the original filter values. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That may be the way you need to do it. The challenge with prep is, like, if you're trying to do a row-based, like if there's some intelligence beyond the row, like you said, I know that I've got a bunch of rows that have to do with this and a bunch of rows that have to do with that. You're going to have to probably bring them in as separate or filtered separately to get them to the way you want them, right? Yeah, good. I think you figured that out. Let's see here. I catch. When you're doing the joins, are the numbers included or excluded based on the sample data or the full data? Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So the sampling is only done for the viewing of the data. It will, in fact, do it to all data rows when you actually run it. Now, the reason this is significant is think of the sampling as what you visually see. Where I ran into a problem and I was working with a customer actually at DHHS on this, and they wanted to group all of the individual values into higher level kind of groupings, right? But they needed to see every single group or individual value before they could group them, and some of them by sampling were getting sampled out. Some weren't showing up, so they didn't know how to properly group them. So in that case, we had to disable the sampling. So, but at the end of the day, whatever you create as your flow happening to the data will happen to every record. It's not going to bypass any certain records, but that's a really good question. Will there be a webinar on creating calculated fields? No, that's very specialized. There's quite a bit of information in our knowledge base on doing, calculated fields. I would say if you're stuck on something, first Google it. If not, Jason or I can help you figure out what you're getting stuck on. But generally speaking, there's a lot of information available on how to create calculated fields, because you could do virtually anything with a calculated field. It's kind of hard to, do that. I will mention too, in the demo here, what I didn't show, I guess I kind of did. No, maybe I didn't. At any point along the way, you can create a calculated field. So you see here, like I could create a brand new field that, let's just say, is full name, and it is made up of, first name plus last name. And I now have a new field called full name. I may probably want to put a space in there, but you can do that in your flow and create calculated fields. So, but yeah, good question. So, anything else? Any questions? I guess new question here. can I use two different outputs from two different flows as an input into a Tableau workbook? You absolutely can. So let's say, for example, I created the output here. This was output one, and this was a CSV, and then the output of another flow was a extract, Tableau extract. I can just, pull those in as data sources in my Tableau desktop as different sources. So you can absolutely do that. Each time I open a flow, it gets alerts even though it ran correctly before I saved it. Why does it change my joins when I reopen a flow? I have no idea. That might be something where I need to work with you on, because I don't know what's going on. It could either be user error, it could be, a bona fide issue. I don't know. I would really have to get in and look. Happy to do that, Susan. Um, yeah, just as kind of a final parting words here, engage us. We love to talk through use cases. We love to get Tableau more utilized within your individual agencies. So between Jason, myself, and Henry, please get a hold of us. And, if you've got questions, you can't figure out how to do something, you can't find a resource, whatever it may be, please engage us. That's not to say that folks like Kim aren't also good resources to go to at DIT for things that are specific to your environment as far as Tableau goes. So I know we're getting to the top of the hour, but with that, I will close it. Thank you for joining today. And also please note that, we've got the upcoming webinar schedules. Kim can probably provide those, and so on. Yeah. Oh, how do we contact me? Yeah, good point. Let me put that up on the screen here before we close. So those are the contacts. These are the contacts if you want to take a quick screenshot of those. So I'm cbartel@tableau.com, and that's a good place to start. And with that, I'll hope all of you have a great day, and we'll talk soon. Thanks for joining.